As a private eye, I've solved countless cases, but the biggest mystery was right under my nose. I catch cheaters for a living, but I never thought I'd be the one getting played. That's the kind of hook that makes you sit up and wonder how a guy like Mesharp, seasoned, a pro at sniffing out lice, could miss the oldest trick in the book. Turns out, the universe loves a good punchline, and I was the sucker in the spotlight. I'm a detective, the kind who tails husbands to fleabag motels where the neon buzzes and the sheets haven't been cleaned since the Nixon era. I shadow wives weaving their tangled webs, spinning excuses flimsier than a politician's promises. It's a living, and I'm damn good at it. I've got an eye for the tells, the nervous twitch, the too quick laugh, the way they clutch their phone like it's a lifeline. Or so I thought. See, I was out there cracking other people's cases, racking up wins, while my own backyard turned into a blind spot big enough to park a semi. My wife started feeding me this line about late-night book clubs. I pictured a bunch of wine-sipping women dissecting Austen or arguing over Hemingway, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Me, the guy who can spot a liar across a crowded bar, nodding along like a chump. But then I noticed the meetings piling up, more frequent than any bookworm could justify. And her phone? She guarded that thing like it held the nuclear codes, fingers hovering over the lock screen whenever I got too close. Red flags don't get much brighter, but I was too busy playing Sherlock for strangers to notice the game shifting under my own roof. Then came the case that cracked it all open. I was on a job, tailing some schmuck who'd been dodging his wife's suspicions for months. Standard gig. Follow, snap, report. I trailed him through back streets and dive bars, my camera ready to catch him in the act. When I developed the photos in my darkroom, I nearly dropped my coffee. There, staring back at me in grainy black and white, was my wife's book club, buddy cozying up to my mark like they were auditioning for a rom-com. The cosmic joke hit me square in the chest, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Here I was, the infidelity expert, blind as a bat to the affair brewing in my own bed. But I'm not the type to curl up and cry about it. I know my worth, and I wasn't about to let this twist the knife deeper than it needed to. So I set a trap, cool and calculated, the way I'd done 100 times for clients. I sent out invites for a client appreciation dinner, a fake work event with enough polish to sell it. Made sure my wife and her side piece were both on the list. Watching them walk in was like watching deer step into a hunter's sights. They didn't know it yet, but I held all the cards, and the deck was stacked. The room buzzed with small talk, plates clinking, wine flowing. I let them stew, let them squirm as they realized they were both there, under the same roof, with me circling like a shark. Then I stood up, glass in hand, and raised a toast. To loyalty, I said, letting the words hang heavy in the air. The rarest of virtues. Their faces were a study in panic-pale, sweaty, eyes darting like they'd seen a ghost. I savored it, that brutal little moment of power, the satisfaction of flipping the script. They'd played me, sure, but I'd just played them better. I finished my drink, set the glass down with a deliberate clink, and walked out. Case closed, I muttered to myself, the words tasting like victory and ash, all at once. I'd learned the hard way that even a detective can miss the clues closest to home. But it sharpened me, honed my edges, reminded me who I am, a man who doesn't break, who doesn't beg, who walks away with his head high. As I stepped into the night, the cool air hit my face, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free, lighter than I'd been in months. But little did I know, this wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test me in ways I never saw coming. The city was a beast that night, all snarling traffic and shadows that swallowed the streetlights whole. I drove home from Mike's bar with my mind churning, the ex, lover's slurred confession looping like a bad record. She's gone. New city, new life. Fine, let her run. I wasn't some lovesick fool chasing a ghost, I just needed answers, the kind that had let me sleep without her face haunting the edges of every dream. I'm a detective. Closing cases is my religion, and this one was personal. Next morning, I started digging. First stop, her sister Claire, a sharp-tongued paralegal who'd always looked at me like I was a stain on her pristine life. She lived in a sleek condo uptown, the kind of place that screamed money and judgment. I buzzed the intercom, and her voice crackled through, dripping with suspicion. "What do you want, Jack?" "5 minutes," I said. "Then I'm gone." She let me up, probably out of pity. Claire stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "She's not here," she said before I could open my mouth. "And no, I don't know where she went." "Bullshit," I replied, stepping past her into the living room. It smelled like lavender and lies. "She'd tell you, you're her safety net." Claire's eyes narrowed, but she didn't kick me out. Progress. I sat on her pristine white cushion invited, just to piss her off, and laid it out. Her little fling crashed and burned. "He's a wreck," says she's bolted. "I need to know where." She hesitated, then sighed, sinking into a chair. "You're not wrong. She called me a week ago, freaking out. Said she'd messed up everything, marriage, affair, all of it. Wanted a clean slate." Claire paused, picking at a manicured nail. "She didn't say where, but she mentioned a job. Something overseas. London, maybe?" London. 1,000 miles and an ocean away. Typical her go big or go home. I pressed Claire for more, but she clammed up, claiming that's all she knew. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Either way, I had a thread to pull. Back at my apartment, I fired up the laptop and started tracing. Overseas jobs don't just fall into your lap. You need contacts, applications, a trail. I hacked into her email and judge. It's not my first rodeo, and found a goldmine, a confirmation from a headhunter. Position, Marketing Director, London branch. Start date, the 1st of October, 2 weeks from now. She was still stateside, prepping to vanish. But here's where it got weird. Nested in the email chain was a name I recognized, Victor Grayson, my old partner from the force, back when I wore a badge instead of a PI's cynicism. Victor had left years ago, traded cop life for corporate security, big money, bigger secrets. Why the hell was his name tied to her gig? I didn't like it, not one bit. I called him, straight to voicemail, his smug drawl promising a callback that never come. So I did what any self-respecting detective would. I staked out his office. Grayson Security sat in a glass tower downtown, all polished steel and arrogance. I parked across the street, sipping lukewarm coffee, waiting for something to break. Around noon, it did. She walked out, my wife, in the flesh, alive and sharper than ever. Hair dyed red, heels clicking like gunfire. She moved with purpose, and right beside her, Victor, laughing like they were old pals. My gut twisted. This wasn't just a job. This was a setup, and I'd been too blind to see it coming. I didn't confront them, not yet. I tailed them instead, keeping my distance as they hit a cafe, then a hotel. Not some sleazy dive, either a ritzy joint where the doorman tipped his hat. Whatever they were planning, it had cash and class behind it. I needed proof, something concrete, before I made my move. That night, I broke into Victor's office. Call it instinct, call it stupidity, I had to know. The place was a fortress, but I've got tricks up my sleeve. Inside, I found files, contracts, photos, a whole dossier on me. She hadn't just left, she'd sold me out. Victor was brokering a deal, using my cases, my contacts, to climb some corporate ladder, and she was his ticket in. I sat there, in the dark, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't about love or guilt, it was betrayal, cold and calculated. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I'd find her, face to face, and unravel this web. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't get to bury me and walk away clean. The plane touched down at Heathrow just as the sky turned a sickly shade of grey, like London itself was warning me to turn back. Too late for that. I'd come here to bury the hatchet, preferably in Victor's back, and I wasn't leaving until I had answers, proof, and maybe a little blood on my knuckles. My wife and my ex-partner had turned my life into their personal piggy bank, and I was done playing the fool. I checked into a cheap hotel near King's Cross, the kind where the walls are thin and the neighbours don't ask questions. Dex had set me up with his ex-MI6 contact, a guy named Miles, who'd apparently traded espionage for a quieter life, quiet being a relative term when you're still cashing favours from the underworld. We were meeting at a pub called the Black Swan, a dive so old it probably served ale to Shakespeare's rejects. Miles was waiting in a corner booth, nursing a pint and looking like he'd seen one too many war's grey hair, sharp eyes, and a scar running down his cheek like a roadmap to bad decisions. He didn't stand when I approached, just nodded to the seat across from him. "You're Jack," he said, voice gravelly enough to pave a driveway. "Dex says you're in over your head." "Dex says a lot of things," I replied, sliding into the booth. "I need intel on Victor Grayson and my wife. They're here, closing some deal, and I want in." Miles took a slow sip of his beer, sizing me up. "Corporate espionage with a side of treason. Messy business. What's your angle?" "Payback," I said, keeping it simple, "and stopping them before they sell out half the free world." He smirked, like I'd just passed some invisible test. "All right, they're meeting tomorrow night at a private club in Mayfair posh place, all velvet and secrets. Victor's pitching to a group of buyers, Russian oligarchs, tech moguls, a few suits with diplomatic immunity. Your wife's the bait, dangling data like a carrot." "What kind of data?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling. "The kind you don't want floating around," Miles said, leaning in. "Government contracts, security protocols, intel from your old cases. They've got enough to destabilize markets or start a small war, if the mood strikes." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to put my fist through the table. My cases, my contacts, years of grinding, reduced to a bargaining chip for their little empire. How do I get close? Miles slid a keycard across the table. "Service entrance. I've got a mate on staff who'll look the other way. You'll need a disguise caterer, maybe. Once you're in, you're on your own. Record what you can, but don't get caught. These people don't mess around." "Neither do I said, pocketing the card. "What's this going to cost me?" "Dex already paid," he replied, finishing his pint. "But if you make it out, I wouldn't mind a favor down the line." "Deal," I said, though I wasn't thrilled about owing another debt. One problem at a time. The next night, I slipped into a borrowed waiter's uniform black vest, white shirt, the work sand, made my way to the club. Mayfair was all gleaming facades and quiet money, the kind of place where betrayal hides behind a polite smile. The service entrance was tucked down an alley, and Miles's contactor twitchy kid with a Cockney accent let me in without a word. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and arrogance. I kept my head down, tray of champagne flutes in hand, weaving through a crowd of suits who wouldn't look twice at the help. Victor was there, holding court in a corner booth, his slick grin sharper than ever. My ex-wife sat beside him, all elegance and ice, her laugh cutting through the murmur like a blade. I edged closer, ears straining as I swapped empty glasses for full ones. Victor was mid-pitch, voice smooth as silk. "Gentlemen, this isn't just Detail's leverage. Access to NATO supply lines, corporate vulnerabilities, even a few skeletons from Westminster. Name your price." A Russian with a neck like a bulldog grunted. "And the delivery?" "Clean," my wife chimed in, her tone clipped and professional. "Encrypted, untraceable. We've got the infrastructure in place thanks to our silent partner." Silent partner. That's what they were calling me now. Cute. I pulled out my phone, tucked it under the tray, and hit record. Every word, every smug little quip caught in digital amber. It wasn't enough to just hear it, I needed something concrete, something to make them sweat. I spotted a briefcase by Victor's feet, sleek and locked tight. If I could get my hands on that, I'd have more than just words. The chance came when a drunk tech bro demanded more champagne. I used the distraction to slip behind Victor, brushing the case with my foot. It didn't budge too heavy, too risky. I'd need another play. Then I heard her voice, closer now, calling for a refill. I turned, keeping my face shadowed, and handed her a glass. Our fingers brushed, and for a split second, her eyes met mine. Recognition flickered, then panic. She knew. "Jack," she whispered, barely audible over the din. I didn't blink. "Enjoying the high life?" Before she could respond, Victor's hand clamped on her arm, pulling her back. "Everything all right, darling?" She recovered fast, plastering on a smile. "Just a clumsy waiter." Victor glanced at me, but I was already moving, melting back into the crowd. My heart pounded, adrenaline singing in my veins. They'd seen me, but I had the recording and they didn't know it yet. I made it out through the kitchen, ditching the uniform in a dumpster, and hightailing it back to the hotel. The recording was gold. Names, deals, enough dirt to bury them twice over. But her reaction gnawed at me. She hadn't just been surprised, she'd been scared. Of me? Or something else? I fired up my laptop and sent the file to Dex with a note, "Back up this. We're not done." Then I poured a whiskey and replayed the night in my head. Victor's briefcase. Her flinch. The buyer's casual talk of chaos. This wasn't just greed, it was bigger, darker, and I was still missing a piece. A knock at the door snapped me out of it. I grabbed my gun, easing toward the peephole. It was Claire, my sister, soaked from the rain and looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Jack," she said, voice trembling as I let her in. "I followed you. I had to. There's something you need to know." I set the gun down, dread pooling in my gut. "What?" She swallowed hard, eyes wide. "Victor's not the one running this. She is, and she's not stopping with London." The room went cold. My wife Hertha puppet master? I'd been chasing the wrong shadow. And just like that, the game flipped again. Weeks had passed since the showdown at the factory, and life had settled into a brittle kind of normal. I was back in my cramped office, the kind with peeling paint, and a desk that creaked under the weight of too many files. The whiskey bottle stayed half full these days. I wasn't celebrating, but I wasn't drowning either. Claire was safe, holed up with a friend in Boston, and the feds had taken my recording and run with it. Politicians squirmed, CEOs resigned, and Victor was probably spilling secrets in some fluorescent-lit interrogation room. My ex-wife? Still a ghost. I figured she'd surface eventually. People like her don't stay quiet forever. But the quiet was what bothered me. Too quiet meant trouble brewing, and I'd learned to trust my gut over the years. That's why, when the phone rang late on a Thursday night, I wasn't surprised, just wary. "Jack," the voice rasped, low and unfamiliar. "You don't know me, but I know you, and I've got something you'll want." I leaned back in my chair, the springs groaning. "I'm not in the market for cryptic sales pitches. Who are you?" "Call me Finch," he said. "I worked for your wife. Past tense. She cut me loose after your little stunt in London, and I'm not the forgiving type." That got my attention. I sat up, grabbing a pen. "Keep talking." "She's moving again," Finch said. "New game, bigger stakes. She's in Buenos Aires now, setting up a deal with some cartel types. Weapons this time military grade, the kind that starts wars. I've got names, dates, a whole dossier. You interested?" "Why me?" I asked, suspicion prickling. "You could take this to the cops, the press, anyone." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Because you're the only one who's ever gotten close to burning her, and because I want her to know it's you who finishes it." I tapped the pen against the desk, thinking. A trap was possible hell, probably, but the bait was too good to ignore. "What's your price?" "Just meet me," he said. "Tomorrow, noon, that diner on 5th. You'll see I'm legit." The line went dead before I could argue. I stared at the receiver, then poured a shot of whiskey and downed it. Buenos Aires, cartels, weapons. She wasn't just back, she was escalating. And if Finch was telling the truth, I had a chance to end her for good. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and grease, the kind of place where secrets thrived in the cracks of vinyl booths. I slid into one near the back, scanning the room. A waitress chewed gum like it was a grudge, and a couple of truckers hunched over their plates. No sign of trouble yet. At 12:03, a wiry guy in a faded jacket slipped in, his eyes darting like a hunted animal's. He spotted me and sat down, dropping a thick envelope between us. "Finch?" I asked. He nodded, pushing the envelope closer. "Everything's in their locations, contacts, even a flight manifest. She's meeting the buyer in 3 days." I opened it, flipping through pages of grainy photos, typed notes, and a map marked with red ink. It was detailed, too detailed, to be a fake on short notice. "Why'd she cut you loose?" Finch's jaw tightened. "I asked too many questions about the London fallout. She doesn't like loose ends of loyalty she can't control." "Sounds familiar," I muttered, pocketing the dossier. "What's your end game here?" He leaned in, voice dropping. "I want out. Clean slate, new name, somewhere she can't find me. You take her down, I disappear. Deal?" I studied him. Desperation clung to him like damp clothes, but his story checked out so far. "Deal," I said. But if this is a setup, Finch, I'll find you first. He smirked, sliding out of the booth. Wouldn't expect less. Good luck, Jack. You'll need it. 2 days later, I was on a red-eye to Argentina, the dossier tucked in my carry-on. Buenos Aires hit me like a fever-hot, chaotic, and pulsing with danger. I checked into a cheap hotel near the docks, where the air stank of fish and diesel, and got to work. The meet was set for a shipping yard, midnight tomorrow. Finch's intel pointed to a container loaded with enough firepower to arm a small army RPGs, assault rifles, even drones. The buyer was a cartel enforcer named Vargas, a man with a rap sheet longer than my arm and a reputation for leaving bodies behind. My ex-wife was brokering the deal, and if I played it right, I could catch her red-handed. I spent the day scouting the yard, mapping exits and blind spots. Security was tight-armed guards, patrolled the perimeter, and cameras blinked from every corner. Going in guns blazing wasn't an option. I needed stealth and proof. I rigged a tiny camera to a crane overlooking the meet spot, linking it to my phone. If I couldn't get close, I'd still get the evidence. Midnight came fast. I crouched behind a stack of rusted barrels, watching through the camera feed as Vargas arrived in a convoy of SUVs. He was a bull of a man, all muscle and menace, barking orders in rapid Spanish. Then she appeared, my ex-wife, stepping out of a sleek car, her presence commanding even in the grime of the yard. She carried a tablet, probably the transaction key. They exchanged words I couldn't hear, but the deal was clear. Vargas handed over a duffel bag cash, most likely, and she tapped the tablet, signaling the container to be opened. I zoomed the camera, catching every move. It was enough to bury her, but I wanted more. I wanted her to see me. I stepped out, gun raised. "Evening, sweetheart. Miss me?" Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Vargas swore, reaching for his piece, but she held up a hand. "Jack," she said, voice icy, "you're like a cockroach, impossible to kill." "Flattery won't help you this time," I said, nodding at the container. "That's a lot of hardware, planning a war." She smiled, thin and sharp. "Just business. You wouldn't understand." Vargas growled, "Who's this gringo?" "An annoyance," she said. "Handle him." The guards moved, but I was ready. I fired a warning shot, then dove behind a crate as bullets flew. The camera kept rolling, capturing the chaos. Vargas shouting, her barking orders, the guards closing in. I took one down with a clean shot to the leg, then bolted for the container, using it as cover. She was slipping away, heading for her car. I couldn't let her escape again. I sprinted after her, dodging fire, and tackled her just before she reached the door. We hit the ground hard, rolling in the dirt. She clawed at me, but I pinned her arms, wrenching the tablet free. "It's over," I panted, shoving her back. "This goes live. Interpol, the feds, everyone. You're done." For once, she had no comeback, just pure, burning hate in her eyes. Sirens wailed, closing in fast. Someone, maybe Finch, had tipped them off. Vargas and his crew scattered, leaving her alone in the dust as I stood, tablet in hand, and watched the cops swarm the yard. Back in the States, the footage and dossier sparked an international manhunt. Her network unraveled arrests in 5 countries, assets seized, and a dozen governments breathing down her neck. She was locked up in a high-security cell somewhere, awaiting trial, and this time, no amount of charm or cash could save her. Finch got his wish-new identity, new life. I didn't ask where, didn't care. Claire called me once, just to say thanks, and I told her to stay out of trouble. Me? I went back to the office, poured a whiskey, and stared out at the city lights. The scars were still there, trust still a ghost, but I'd won. For now. The phone rang again. Another case, another shadow. I smiled grimly and picked it up. The game never ends, but I'm still the best player in town. Jack thought Buenos Aires was the endgame. His ex-wife's operation dismantled, her smug face behind bars, and a rare win notched on his belt. He was wrong. Back in his dingy office, sipping lukewarm coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. Across the street, a black sedan idled, its tinted windows staring back like unblinking eyes. He'd seen too many tales in his career to chalk it up to paranoia. Someone was watching. 2 days later, Confirmation slipped under his door in the dead of night. A letter. No stamp, just his name in her sharp, familiar scrawl. Inside, a single line. You think you've won, but you've only stirred the hive. No signature needed. She was caged, sure, but her venom still flowed through a network he'd barely scratched. Jack crumpled the note and tossed it, but the unease stuck. Victory, it turned out, had a price. The call came from Rita, a journalist friend with a knack for trouble and a voice tight with urgency. "Jack, meet me. Diner on 5th. 30 minutes." He didn't argue. Rita didn't spook easy. Grabbing his coat, he stepped out, the sedan still lurking like a shadow. At the diner, Rita slid a folder across the table, her coffee cold and her eyes sleepless. "You've kicked a hornet's nest, Jack. Your ex wasn't the top dog, she was a pawn for the syndicate." The folder spilled open. Photos, bank records, and a name that hit like a punch, the syndicate. A ghost story in his world. A cabal of power brokers and criminals who thrived in the cracks of the system. Buenos Aires had cost them millions and blown a hole in their secrecy. Now, Jack was a loose end. "They're not just coming for you with guns," Rita warned. "They'll freeze your accounts, fake warrants, ruin your name, then kill you when you're broken." Her hands shook slightly. "I'm on their list too. I was digging when I found you tied to this mess." Jack leaned back, jaw tight. "Why stick your neck out for me?" "Because we're both dead if we don't fight," she said. "Together, we can expose them. But we need to vanish first safe house outside the city." He nodded. "My rules. Quiet, no headlines till we're ready." Rita agreed, and they had a deal. The syndicate wanted him erased. He'd make them regret putting him on the board. The safe house was a crumbling cabin in the woods, all creaking boards and too much quiet. Rita turned it into a war, room laptops humming, phones encrypted, a whiteboard mapping the syndicate's tangled web. Days bled into nights as they traced money and names, each discovery peeling back another layer of the beast. It was slow, brutal work, but they were closing in. Then the power died. Darkness swallowed the cabin, and Jack's gut screamed ambush. He grabbed his gun, signaling Rita to duck. Footsteps crunched outside 2 figures, armed, moving like hunters. She shoved a flash drive into her boot, the evidence they'd bled for. If they died, it had to live. The door exploded inward, and Jack fired, dropping one. Bullets ripped back, shredding the walls. Rita yelped as a round grazed her arm. Jack tackled her behind the couch, returning fire. A second shadow fell, but headlights flared outside. More were coming. The cabin was a trap now. "Car now," he barked, dragging Rita up. They bolted out the back, her blood staining his sleeve, and sprinted for the hidden sedan. Bullets chased them, tearing through trees. They dove in, Jack slamming the gas as tires clawed dirt. The safe house faded in the mirror, a lost battleground. Rita, pale but fierce, clutched her arm. "We can't keep running, Jack. We hit back." He nodded, knuckles white on the wheel. "First, we need backup. Someone who fights dirty." She smirked through the pain. "Ever hear of Cypher? Hacker, legend, hates suits like these bastards." "No," Jack said. "But if you trust him, that's enough. The syndicate wanted war. He'd bring it straight to their throats." The city pulsed with a restless energy, its streets cloaked in shadows and secrets. Jack stood in a dank alley behind an abandoned warehouse, the air heavy with the tang of rust and fuel. Beside him, Rita clutched a flash drive, their golden Tikether arm bandaged, but her resolve unbroken. They'd clawed their way through betrayal, bullets, and the syndicate's unrelenting pursuit to get here. Now, it was time to finish it. Their next move was Cypher, a hacker Rita swore by, a ghost who could unravel the syndicate's digital empire. His lair was a basement beneath the warehouse, a concrete tomb lit by the eerie glow of screens. Thin and jittery, Cypher didn't bother with greetings, just waved them to a pair of battered chairs. "You're late," he said, eyes darting across his monitors. "They're closing in." Jack sat, exhaustion gnawing at his bones. "Can you crack their server?" Cypher grinned, a feral edge to it. "I could crack the Devil's Diary, but their headquarters, that's a fortress guards, locks, tech I'd kill to play with. You'll need a miracle." Rita leaned in, her voice steady. "We've got a distraction. I'll leak a story, something juicy, a fake whistleblower with their ledger. It'll pull their muscle away." You two sneak in during the chaos. Cypher raised an eyebrow. If they don't buy it? They will, Jack cut in, his tone hard. They're rattled. One shove, and they'll trip over themselves. Cypher sized him up, then nodded. Fine. Get me to their mainframe, and I'll rip it open every deal, every body they've buried. We go live with it. They can't bury the truth if it's screaming. Jack liked the plan raw, risky, and right up his alley. Let's do it. The syndicate's headquarters towered over the city, a gleaming fortress of glass and steel that mocked the law. Jack and Cypher crouched in a van across the street, watching as Rita's fake story hit like a bomb. Whistleblower threatens to expose syndicate's bookser, lie so bold it sent guards spilling out, racing to chase a phantom. The building's defenses thinned, just as planned. Jack moved first, Cypher shadowing him. They slipped through a service door Cypher had already hacked, the lock clicking open like a whisper. Inside, the halls were too quiet, sterile as a morgue. Jack's instincts screamed ambush, but he pushed forward. They were in too deep to retreat. The server room was a maze of humming machines and blinking lights. Cypher plugged in, his hands a blur. 5 minutes, he hissed. Don't let them near me. Jack took position by the door, gun ready. Time crawled, each second a hammer on his nerves. Then boots on tile, fast and heavy. He glanced at Cypher. 3 minutes, the hacker muttered, sweat beading on his brow. The door exploded inward, and Jack fired, dropping a guard in a spray of red. Bullets ripped through the air, shredding metal and glass. He ducked behind a rack, returning fire, each shot a calculated kill. More guards stormed in too many. The syndicate had sent their dogs, and they were hungry. Cypher, hurry! Jack shouted, slamming in a fresh clip. Got it! Cypher yanked the drive free, triumphant. We're gold move. They ran, Jack laying cover as bullets chewed the walls. The halls turned into a battlefield, smoke curling, blood pooling. They hit the stairwell, barricading the door with a fire extinguisher. It wouldn't hold, but it bought seconds. Downstairs, Rita gunned the van's engine, and they dove in as she peeled out, the syndicate's fortress shrinking in the rear view. Back in Cypher's bunker, the upload was lightning fast. The flash drive's contents ledgers, emails, videos of murders and bribes flooded the internet, live and unstoppable. Every screen in the city blared the syndicate's sins, their empire cracking as the world watched. Arrests came swift and brutal, leaders dragged out in cuffs or gunned down by rivals seizing the chaos. Jack sat in his office, a cracked television flickering with the fallout. His name was everywhere, the detective who'd toppled the untouchable. But he didn't feel victorious, just worn, a man who'd outlasted the storm. Rita called, her voice softer now. It's done, Jack. We won. For now, he said, eyes on the city lights beyond his window. His ex-wife lingered in the wreckage, still caged in a cell, her own kingdom ash. A letter Kamaher last barb. You've only delayed the inevitable. He didn't finish it, just fed it to the flame of a match, watching it curl and die. Months later, Jack was back where he fit this office, his desk, the grind. The scars stayed, trust still a fractured thing, but he'd made peace with it. The syndicate was a memory, its pieces scattered, and the city rolled on, indifferent as ever. He poured a whiskey, the glass a cold comfort, and lifted it to the silence. To the ghosts, he said, draining it. Then he grabbed his coat and stepped into the night, the city's pulse a steady beat. The game never stops, but neither does he. And for Jack, that was enough.